I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, October 1, 2019 meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have a quorum of 6 commissioners. If you would like to speak, you'll need to speak at the microphone so that your words can be recorded for the official record, and you have to have signed in. Is the sign-up sheet outside or is it on the lectern?
I'll bring it in.
There's a sign-up sheet outside.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and if you'd like to speak, I'd say sign up now so it doesn't delay the proceedings. Wait a sec for Karlis. Okay, so there are 2 matters that are being continued till our next meeting that we have to vote to continue. So the first one is Old Business 2404 Ridge Avenue. Could I have a motion to continue that to the next meeting, please? Elliot, a second?
Second.
Susie, all in favor, vote
Didn't
aye.
make the motion.
Aye.
I'm sorry. Just to continue.
So moved.
We understood what you meant. The other matter that will be continued to the next meeting is the last item on the agenda, 601 Davis Street. Could we have a motion to continue that to the next meeting?
Is that being continued, or I thought it was, oh, okay. I move that we continue 601 Davis to the meeting of November 12th, 2019.
Second.
Second. All in favor, vote aye. Signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Unanimously in favor. Okay. The next item on the agenda is 835 Michigan Avenue. Go ahead.
So I am the homeowner again. I was the one that was presenting last time.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Matt Kerr. I'm the homeowner of 835 Michigan Avenue. As a follow-up from last time, I think there were 2 key requests. One was noted at the end of the meeting, which was to see pictures of the other facades, which may help in the decision-making process. And then subsequently, after this meeting, I was also able to locate, after the last meeting, I was also able to locate an old photo of the house, which I believe depicts the original windows, which I'll also walk through. But those are the two key items from last meeting. So I'm going to try to use the pointer. I don't find it difficult to do. The top left photo is the picture I was able to locate of the house. It's from about 1955, I believe, is what was stated on the back of the card. You can see the setup in the front of the house has the 2 double-hung windows with the transom, and then the picture in the middle on the top elevation, and then the bottom elevation has the 2 double-hung, the transom, and then what looks to be a larger double-hung. I believe this is the original setup just based on the design of the double-hung windows. So again, just for reference, this is what was there. The photo on the right, top right, and I'll again try to point, is the setup that's currently in the house, so clearly it's changed. This is the setup with the, that's part of the request, which is the to replace the casement windows with double-hung. So the casement windows there, again, seem to be I don't know exactly when they were installed, but they look to be about 10, 15 years old. So that's just a side-by-side comparison so you can get a sense of how it's changed. You can see there was no window on the left side of the house, and then The setup is, I would say, somewhat similar on the bottom, a little bit larger, but both openings were widened, and the top attic window, for whatever reason, was narrowed. The wooden shakes on the house still remain, but outside of that, the setup has changed a bit. And then the rest of the photos, which I won't, I guess, walk through individually, I'll just make a couple of key points. Most of the photos, all of the windows, excuse me, are double hung. As noted last time, a lot of them are newer. There is one window that could possibly be original to the house. It is also double hung. But having seen now this older photo, I'm not even sure that window in the bathroom, it's definitely old, but that it's the original to the house. But again, most of the windows are double hung. And the other point I will make is the two photos here, which show the north and south sides of the house, which are kind of tucked in between my neighbors' houses, which are very tight. That setup is comparable. It looks to me to be very comparable to the setup that was originally on the front of the house. So you have the transom with the two double hungs and the picture window. So I'll stop there. The request, remains the same from last time. This is just to follow up with the supporting information that was unanswered from last meeting.
I'm sorry, maybe you could, my memory at least isn't that good. Maybe you could at least in like a minute refresh us to what the request was.
Yeah, so if you look at the top right picture, it would be to replace those windows. The top elevation would all be switched to Marvin double hung aluminum clad windows. And then the bottom elevation, the transoms would remain, the picture window in the middle would remain. It would be replaced, but with comparable windows. So similar transom Marvin windows, as well as the picture window in the middle would be replaced with Marvin. And then the other casement windows and then the fixed window on the left would also be replaced with Marvin double hung. There is, I know Karlis did attach the prior application.
You can click
through.
Left or right.
So I'm trying to get, so this is the picture of what those windows would look like in place.
Are there other questions?
Could you go back to the 1955 view again?
I think just looking up on the Evanston site, at one point this was hypothesized to be like a Gothic revival house, and then it was converted at one point to I think a stick style, if I'm remembering correctly.
I just have a quick question. This isn't a landmark, right? No. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
I just want to say, I just thank you for coming back. I mean, these really help, and I know, I think I was the one that asked that you have more information, so I appreciate it, and it really does help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this matter? Thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, I think this is an excellent photo to understand the history of the house, so thank you for doing that research. And I think the key thing is that the original windows were not divided lights. There are no muntins in any of the sash in the original, so I would wonder if you're willing in the new windows to just eliminate the muntin grills completely and have single pane or single light sashes. Yeah,
so that is a possibility. The only thing I was concerned about with the wider opening is it's hard to grasp, even with a rendering, it's hard to grasp exactly what that would look like in the house. And to some extent, the muttons help ground it, but that is an option. Potentially, I don't know for sure whether it would or not. It is an option to answer your question.
I don't know. I just want to respond to Ken. I just want to say that because the opening was changed in scale and it's just really different from that original, that I think I sort of tend to agree that the muttons in terms of the scale help to, when you're having with these large expanses of glass, it's so different from that original image. So that's.
All right. Would anybody like to make a motion? Go ahead, Kalia.
I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 835 Michigan for replacing the windows on the east front facade, removing the existing clad casements, and replacing them with double-hung windows with simulated divided lights and transoms, removing the picture window, replacing that with a picture window as well with a transom above, second floor, removing the clad windows with simulated divided lights and replacing them with double-hung aluminum clad windows with simulated divided lights. And there will be some hardy cement trim. All of these are in accordance with standards for alteration 1 through 5.
A second? Like a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous in favor. Okay, thank you. The next matter is 1330 Lake Street.
Mr. Rogers, I added the photos you sent.
Great.
And the page with the description of the house from the nomination.
Okay.
And then the photos of the existing, so you will see that.
Okay. Hello, Historical Commission. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I am the owner of 1330 Lake. My name is Chad Rogers, and I've been before you before regarding windows. We're back now for exterior siding. It seems that the gift keeps on giving as I continue on this project and down this merry way. As you might remember in the past, just to give you a quick picture, it was stucco. Subsequently, we are looking, as an overarching 50,000-foot view, we are looking to already remove, the stucco's already been removed, but we're looking to basically put back on cedar siding. And I want to read something real fast. This is from the historical documents regarding the house itself. Particularly want you to identify the last line on 226. The sentence starts at the time of its move, the house was stuccoed and its front porch was enlarged, although it was later removed. As you can see from the pictures, the porch was removed. There used to be a wraparound porch. And when it was built in 1866, it did have clapboard, which was cedar at that time. When they moved it, of course, they just stuccoed right over it. I see a lot of houses in Evanston that have been stuccoed. I think there was probably a potentially really great salesman or woman in the stucco industry at that time. But they took some great clapboard houses and they stuccoed it. As a result of the process of what we had previously received, the certificate of appropriateness was the windows that we added. In order to do the windows properly with stucco, they had to cut about 2 feet around each window. So that's what it looked like previously. And this is what it looks like underneath all that stucco. So what happened is when they were cutting to make the stucco float, the stucco started falling off. It's a 103-year-old stucco, and it did quite a good job for that time. But I think it was definitely time for it to come off. It literally peeled off in chunks that were 2 by 5, all the way down to about 2 by 2. So it became quite the nightmare as they were trying to cut around the windows and then ultimately put back on stucco. What we're trying to propose, and I'll show you the various sides of it, some of the wood, particularly under the porch, I didn't get a good picture on it. And that back porch, the wood's in decent condition, but generally the wood in itself, again, is better part of 150 years old and is definitely damaged in probably greater than 60, maybe 70% around the home. So what I am requesting is basically that's what we're looking for, is to bring it back to its original historical roots by adding 4.5-inch reveal, no-knot cedar siding, with all the various accoutrements for the details that accompanied the previous home. So those are kind of the pictures. So this is what some of the window details will look like, matching what was there prior to the best of our abilities, so the same width, depth, and height as previously was there. It shows some of the details of how they're going to kind of connect both the cedar siding to the windows, as well as to the side details that were previously there as well at the top, and the dentils and things of that nature. These are some of the other side details that we think were added after, because they were actually on top of the old clapboard. So they were added after the fact, maybe to give the home some dimension. I don't have a picture, and I've searched. I asked my neighbors, and they didn't have any pictures. They only had pictures of when it was stuccoed, which we already basically provided the exact same picture. And so these corners will be built out, and they'll be kept, and the cedar, no-knot cedar, will be used to make sure that those details remain, keeping some of that historical nature, at least from 1916 era when they potentially put on the stucco. This is what it will look like. It doesn't have the trim around the windows, but it will look something to the effect the colors are not exactly correct. But these are the various angles of how it will look from both the south side, the east side, and the west, or the east side, and then the west side there. One of the aspects of course, taking off this stucco revealed quite a few issues with the underlayment and lack thereof of waterproofing, which one would assume wouldn't be relevant at that time in that time period. So we are, of course, asking whether we do stucco or cedar, depending on the approval of the Historical Commission. The wood's got to come off, and the house needs to be waterproofed with Tyvek waterproofing, which is part of the bid that we have received from Buzz Home Pros, who will be doing the work as it stands right now. The commission requires me to do stucco. I'll be going with Heritage, and they'll be doing the Heritage exterior. They'll be doing the stucco. I would prefer and request that the Historical Commission would approve the ability to put up the cedar siding with the 4.5-inch reveal, which would have matched the home in its 1866 original form before the 1916 facial transition. Is there any more? That's it. So just to recap real quick, home built 1866, moved in 1916. They stuccoed. Originally it was cedar or clapboard. I'm requesting to be able to put cedar siding, 4.5-inch reveal, which would match what was under the stucco, and asking the commission to allow me to Tyvek as soon as possible to prevent water intrusion into the home.
All right, questions? Okay, want to have a seat, please. Is there anybody from the audience who'd like to speak to this matter? No? Any discussion? No? Susie would like to make a motion, please.
I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness to 1330 Lake Street for the removal of the stucco finish and exposed wood siding on all exterior walls and replacement with a no-knot cedar siding to match the original siding from 1866, I believe you said. Applicable standards include alteration 1 through 7.
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
I'm sorry,
Unanimously in favor.
Who's second?
Carl.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. 834 Madison Street. Gary.
Good evening. My name is Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Build Associates. I'm here on behalf of my client, Tim Daisy, for the project at 834 Madison Street. So, this is a landmark property. It is not in a landmark district. We are proposing effectively an exterior restoration of this house. We have surveyed all of the windows in the house and have determined that, let's see, Karlis, you have a new pointer. There you go. We've determined that all the windows on the first floor on the front are solid candidates for full restoration. We've engaged TMC windows, so we'll be reconstructing those windows. The windows on the upper floor, we're proposing to replace with Pella Architect Series landmark windows. The other work we're proposing on the first floor is to replace these existing attic dormer windows, which have been taken apart and replaced with louvers. We're replacing those also with Pella Architect Series windows. And for the front facade, we're removing this this picture window, which was added and then blocked up from behind to create a closet. So it's not a window, but it's a piece of glass on the exterior. Our scope of work includes repairing and restoring the stucco throughout, as well as any of the rotted and damaged trim over the course of the life of this house. This is the west-facing facade. You can see the areas where we've identified the failed stucco. You can see that it's bulged and cracked, so we'll be pulling that off and restoring the stucco in that area as well. These windows in the front porch, also fully restored. This will be an Architect Series window. All of the windows in this bay are monumental windows. They're oversized, so we are going to fully restore those windows in the bay. These are existing windows that were replaced by the previous owner. Those are clad Marvin windows. We've chosen to go with an Architect Series from Pella because that particular series of Marvin has been outdated. They're still serviceable, but we're not going to replace them at this time. A notable change for that elevation. From the rear of the house, again, we've identified the significant deterioration in the stucco. All of the stucco on the house is going to be repaired, restored, and recoated. These windows are existing to remain. These windows are Pella. These windows in the mudroom will be restored. This is an existing vinyl clad window that will be replaced with an Architect Series window from Pella as well. On the east-facing facade, these windows are vinyl windows, and these are vinyl windows. All those will be removed and replaced with Architect Series Pella windows. These will be removed and replaced with Architect Series windows. And this window also will be removed. It is in the back of a closet, also boarded up. So when we do the stucco restoration, we will infill that window and recoat that with stucco. We've included a series of photographs. In your packet or on your tablets, you'll be able to see that there is some damage to the cornice work and the scalloped shingles. All of that will be repaired and restored in kind. There are several window sills that are rotten. Those will be repaired and restored in kind. We won't be removing any trim unless it's rotten. It'll all be replaced in kind as it is. Basement windows also noted in there will all be replaced. There's a mixture of those. Some of them have been replaced with vinyl. Most are original windows and have failed and rotted over time. So we'll replace those all with clad Architect Series windows. So. Okay.
Is it on the east that you've got that sort of lower transom or awning window with the casements above it?
This one?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's not an original.
No, it's not. That is I would guess it's one of the recycled Anderson windows.
I mean, is there
That'll
a
be
reason
coming out and being replaced.
Is there something about you're not replacing that?
We are replacing it with a Pella Architect Series window, but we'll replace it in kind.
Okay. Any reason?
There's no reason to change it. It functions properly in the kitchen.
Okay, so there's something about what's going on inside. All right. I think there's another one that on the south elevation. You just go back. over, I don't know if this thing's.
So this double hung window
Yeah.
was also infilled in the low panel, again, as a result of the kitchen remodeling from a previous owner. Those are all vinyl clad, substandard windows that they've all failed at this point.
Okay, other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the audience who's here to speak about this project? No? Thank you. Any discussion? Would somebody like to make a motion? Somebody? Go ahead, Elliot. Thank you.
I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 834 Madison for the repair and refinish of the existing stucco finishes as been designated on the drawings, and for replacing selected wood windows with Pella traditional architectural clad windows, and certain vinyl windows, again, being replaced with Pella Architectural Series windows. And I believe there are a few other windows to be restored and fitted, and also basement windows to be replaced with clad awning windows. And mutton patterns are proposed on the new windows to match the existing. That would be applicable standards 1 through 7.
For alterations.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
For alteration 1 through 7.
Second? Somebody like Aleka, second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Unanimously in favor. Okay, thank you. 2727 Lincoln Street.
Good evening. My name is Donnelly Floater. I'm an architect. I'm here representing my clients, Jennifer and David Stryker, who are the homeowners of 2727 Lincoln. We are proposing to do additions to the rear of the home. Let me find pictures. That's the front, which is very lovely, and I included it because I had fun drawing that. We are not proposing any change to the front of the house. Everything we're doing is on the rear. This is the existing back of the house. It is a combination of brick and stucco with the garage attached at the rear. So the driveway comes from the alley through the yard to the back of the house. I can go back to the plat. So the alley is at the top. The driveway is at the top left corner coming to the existing garage.
Can you use the pointers?
Which one
Is
is
there a
that?
little green line there?
Okay. Oh, this is the driveway. The garage is attached here. I'm just so shaky. Oh, sorry. And the addition is going to be back in the rear of the house here. The current garage is attached, but you can't get to the inside of the house from the attached garage. So part of what we'll be doing is allowing a mudroom and a powder room to occupy some of the existing garage space, extend the garage farther towards the alley, and have a better entry for the family. They have active kids into sports and could use the space there. The kitchen is also very small for a house of this size and age. So one of the other things we're doing on the first floor is enlarging the kitchen and adding a family room. So on the back of the house, the first floor portion is generally brick, and the second floor portion is all stucco. If it would help to get to a photograph first, maybe? There's my crazy. So this is the existing back of the house, with showing the garage from the alley. That's brick, and then the second floor is all stucco. This is what it looks like from the alley. And then that's from within the yard. So you wouldn't get this view from public space, but that's what it looks like from within the yard. So the first floor is brick, and the second floor is finished with stucco, and the roof is cedar. So we're proposing to add on the back portions are 1-story and 2-story to enable this enlargement of their house and extend the garage farther out for the alley. That's what we need the variance for, because we'd be encroaching on the 30-foot rear yard setback. Even with all of this work, we are nowhere near exceeding our lot coverage, so there's no worries about additional roof lot coverage or impervious surfaces. So from the side, this house has a lot of different detail. There's brick, there's stucco, there's wood. The front windows are steel originals, we think, from the 1920s when this house was built. Most of the windows on the rear, some are double hung, some are casements. So just have tried to fit them to the rooms that they're going with. That's the existing west side. And that would be the proposed west side, showing the garage extension going farther, but nothing else about that side is changing other than portions of the roof line to make the roof slopes work right. That's my crazy 3D drawing. Is there anything in particular you'd want me to point out or show you?
Perhaps you could just show us specifically what you're adding to the rear facade of the house.
Okay.
It was hard from even the 3D drawing to tell exactly what was added versus what was
it's
new.
probably easier from a plan, but plans aren't included in the package any longer.
Yeah.
So this gabled end here is new. All of this down here is new, and then this gable end is new. This hip roof here is new to incorporate the roof that's currently over this portion of the house. And then this garage is extended farther out from the current garage. So a lot of the back is extended out. The portion that extends the farthest is the garage. Then this portion, which is the kitchen, this portion is the family room. Upstairs, it's one additional bedroom, and this is a master bath. My goat. That is the existing east. So what happens here is basically from here, it extends out into the backyard. That's the west. The only thing on the west is that additional garage and then the changes in the roof lines. So nothing of the addition would you would not be able to see any of it from the front. The bulk of it is from the alley. We're proposing to use Marvin windows. As I said, there's sort of a mixed type of window on this house already. So we're going with casements and double hungs where those seem appropriate for the use of the space.
In terms of the material on the back, I'm just having hard time following.
Sure. The first floor
brick
is
versus
brick,
stucco.
and then the second floor is stucco.
Okay, so it'll be maintained.
It's hard to see it because of the fence location and the trees. But basically, the first floor is brick and the second floor is stucco, and we're sticking with that.
Okay.
Can I Can I say something?
Go ahead, Julie.
So this is a pretty complicated addition, and I cannot understand it exactly or to be able to evaluate it just with the elevation drawings and just your sort of partial 3D drawing, which doesn't really show the whole assembly. I definitely think plans would help us. So I know sometimes we get those, but it is just, it's just pretty complicated, and it is a landmark, and so I think I would need additional information, a 3D rendering of the whole, seeing the whole mass of it, or a model or something, because I just think the drawings, tend to flatten everything out, and it's
Right.
really hard to understand how the windows are transforming or changing or whatever, so.
Yeah, I think, Donna, you stated it as plans are not allowed, I think was your term, and that's not quite right. They're not part of the package that
Right.
goes to Karlis, but there's nothing that precluded you from including them as part of the
I'll be
presentation
happy to
tonight,
submit
which I think,
those for
I mean, it's
another
not,
review.
yeah. I think we need to start making that much clearer to the applicants, Karlis.
I mean, I think it goes to the zoning variance too in this case, because we kind of need to see what the rationale is to need to extend the garage back into
Right.
the
And
into the
plans were
zoning.
included in the variance package because I
Right.
filed that first.
Right.
And then somehow I misunderstood. I thought the current rules for this commission was that plans were not to be included.
In the formal package,
Right.
that's true.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's what we place online is, we don't show the plans, but the applicant is free to bring them to the meeting.
Okay. Well, I'll be happy to submit those and have you review those at that point. Basically, the argument for the variance is that this house is set so far back on the lot that it has a larger front yard than any other house on the block, and that if it were even set at the average, this variance wouldn't be needed to extend the garage. And as I said earlier, the garage is, right now the house has a small entry porch off the back. You go out of the garage into the yard, up into the porch, through a tiny hallway into the tiny kitchen. So those things are what the homeowners would like to correct in doing this addition, to have more space as you enter the back of the house with their children and sports equipment, et cetera.
I have a quick question. So in terms of the variance issue, that is, this is for Karlis. This is just we would be looking at that, and it would just be
It's a recommendation.
a recommendation. So one of the things about that for us to make that recommendation, as well as in terms of what you just said about the other adjacent properties and where their facades are, that would be helpful to understand that. I think first of all, I'm sorry that that wasn't clear, and I do think this is recent that we are not getting plans, and so I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, because it would have helped us. But then the other information, I think you could just help your case if you had, if you're looking at us to make a recommendation on zoning, I think we really do need to see why there's a hardship involved.
Right. Again, all of that was included in the zoning application.
Right, so-
I wasn't aware that it would be.
Well, because we're just making a recommendation, but we still have to understand. And then I do think it would be helpful, your sketch of your massing is taken sort of part of it from the front and some from the back, and so it's just hard to understand. I think that's what the complication is here.
Should we continue, move to next month, and I'll bring more information?
Yeah, I think we should also see if there are any members of the public have comment, because there could be other things you have to respond to.
True.
And we might as well get everything on the table now so
Sounds
that you
good.
can come back once.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who, go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name's Nancy Smith. I live across the alley behind the house. I'm at 2724 Harrison. And my concerns are not with the appearance of what they're proposing. It's that it's with drainage. That, as they said, that house is set very far back from Lincoln so that it's very close to the alley. The alley between our houses has a long-time serious flooding problem. That it's a paved alley that is lowest in the center section between our houses, so it's often ankle-deep in water, and it has no drainage. I've spoken with city officials about this on a number of occasions, but the point is that the significant amount of impermeable surface that they are proposing to add to the back of the house, I know in terms of total size of the lot, but they may meet the requirements, but the area that drains from the house to the alley is actually not very large. They want to add a tremendous amount of impermeable space. I believe the plans also call for a terrace in addition to the additions in the rear. This will exacerbate the current flooding problem in the alley just by adding the impermeable surface. And also, as I think everyone who's lived next to an addition project knows, when they're finished with the work, they've destroyed the yard, the landscapers come in, they add 6 to 12 inches of dirt and sod and everything else. I've never seen a project where the backyard is not functionally raised at the end of the project. So between the impermeable surface and the likelihood of raising the backyard, that is going to exacerbate the alley flooding even worse. And so this is my concern, is with the drainage. There's two issues: how much they're adding to a problem, and the other issue, of course, is that the city has not addressed the problem with this alley.
Thank you.
So one of the things I believe that to get a permit, you have to have a civil drawing. And so especially if this I don't actually know which comes first, but the civil, in terms of what you're saying, must be done to, yes, more if this is an issue. And I just think that's always part of the permit. And so I don't know, Carlos, if you know if the civil drawings go with getting the variance or they just go with getting the permit.
Typically, the engineer will look at the permit drawings, and the zoning is separate from engineering, as much as preservation is separate from engineering. So the engineer will decide whether or not they have proper drainage with the alterations. And the additions too.
Yeah, so basically, if a variance was approved, which who knows if it will be, then to get a permit, civil drawings must be drawn to solve these issues. Mm-hmm. So you're saying that at some point in this process, the drainage issues should be addressed? They should, because the city does require civil drawings. I know so it seems to me that they have to be. I mean,
correct.
As an architect working
address
the
drainage issue, but
I just wanted to be sure it was on record that there is a long-time flooding problem in the alley behind this house, which affects, a number of houses, those of us who are sort of the center part of the block. And I can't see that this project would do anything other than to make it worse. So I don't have issues with the design, but I am very concerned about the drainage.
Is there some way the speaker could communicate that? I mean, we're probably just not we're really addressing preservation issues, not engineering issues. Is there some way the speaker could communicate that so it wouldn't be lost? I mean,
you could, if you wish, call 311 and either make an appointment or ask for the city engineer to express your concerns, which will be reflected in the minutes here. But eventually, it will get to the city engineer with the permit drawings that will have to show that the drainage is properly handled.
So I should call 311, and I mean, I've done this in the past, but I should do it again.
Right, but
how long?
I will suggest that until they apply for permit, unless you have drawings that will show what the problem is, the engineer will not be able to make a decision without the civil drawings that will show the drainage.
And who does civil drawing?
Well, the architects will have to provide that.
Okay.
All
How
right.
long ago was that alley paved?
I've been in the house.
Before your time,
I've been in the
Jeff?
house 30 years, and the alley was paved with multiple cracks and holes in it 30 years ago.
So you don't have a lot of sewer manholes down the
Oh, no,
length of that?
we don't have.
Sewer. On information and belief, we've been told it's one of the oldest alleys.
Yeah.
Excuse me, can you please identify yourself and go to the mic?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll let you take over on that part.
Jeff Smith, 2724 Harrison, here to support my wife, which I recommend everybody do. And I want to start by saying that this is indeed a beautiful house. You're fortunate to have the opportunity to work on it.
I feel fortunate.
Our son is an architect, and I have the greatest respect for the profession. In fact, the curved walk on this property in the front was one of the inspirations for my putting in a curved walk in my own property. I would like to bring a couple items to the architects and the commission's attention. I'm sure that the commission will follow the standards and apply the standards. I have a high degree of confidence, just based on what I've seen already, that it'll be a beautiful work in the back. However, it's not a house that's only visible to the public from the alley. This is a picture taken this afternoon from my bedroom window. I have one for the commission. Sorry.
Don't be overzealous.
Show it up, but as you can see, just looking, what we see from our relatively modest, though 90-year-old house, built with the same stucco that was slathered on everything back then, is largely this house and the one to the east of it on Lincoln. And this is during the summer with the trees. Obviously, there's more. So there's a fair amount of mass that already exists on the lot because it is set so far back from the street, which provides a beautiful boulevard on Lincoln Avenue. But actually, this house and the houses on Lincoln are closer to the alley than the houses on Harrison. So that should be taken into consideration as a measure of sensitivity. That moving the walls 10, 20 feet closer to our house puts it that much closer to our yard and to our bedroom. From the ground, and I don't have a ground level picture looking up, we would never see, and nobody walking down the alley is going to see the lowest level. The terrace will be essentially private for the strikers. And what was not mentioned by either the architect or my wife is that if that terrace is built with the lot as is, the strikers will be able to use it for fishing, because the city has allowed half a dozen properties on the block, if not more, to add impervious surface, to add to the mass and the bulk of their houses, and as my wife mentioned, routinely when that's done, regardless of what's submitted to the city for engineering reports, the lots are raised and the city looks the other way, collects its fees, and the people that remain on the block that have not raised their yards, which are now only a few of us, suffer an increasing amount of water. Now, because of the age of the alley, it's not flat, nor is it crowned in the middle. In fact, it's designed it now functions the opposite of what an alley should be. It is pitched in the middle so that water does not leave until it eventually soaks into the ground. It's not sewered on this end. They sewered the east end of it when the so-called man cave house was redone there. I guess TV will get you that, but we've never had a TV special for our house. So water sits, and except the part, of course, that flows into our backyard and the strikers, which I don't peer over their fence, but I can see underneath their fence, and it is a lake. during moderate rainstorms because of all the runoff from all the existing houses. I would suggest that the impervious surface rules, and I'll submit this. And this is not the worst that I've seen, and I could show you pictures of our yard that would horrify you. But I'm looking forward to now. I just ask for some sensitivity as this is built. I would not have a problem with the garage coming closer to the alley. I think that having the garage being an attached garage required to be so far back from the alley is an archaic rule that predates the establishment of the impervious surface lot requirements, and it effectively substituted for that before we had the percentages that we now have. And in fact, having some garages closer to the alley would avoid having big flat driveways, although the kids may want to shoot hoops. I know they do over there. So I'm not objecting to that, but I would ask, because this commission, and I know this is not the place to get into engineering, but because this commission has some leverage in the discussions with the owners, you will note in the first picture that I gave you that you can see there's a light on the garage that's already visible from my bedroom window, even at the current distance. Lights that are on in the attic shine like a spotlight. For some reason, there was one that was on for a couple days earlier this spring. Not sure why. So there's, you just hate to have to turn down, completely close your blinds at night. There's this trend in Evanston where people want to light up their yards like the parking lot of a Kmart, and they shine spotlights up into trees for God knows what reason. They don't like owls or bats or something. But there's too much lighting as it is. So if this is permitted to come forward, the whole thing, I would ask both the architect and the owners and the commission to display some sensitivity towards those who live behind the houses and get the light spillover, et cetera. But because of the trees and because of the fence, the modifications to it's not going to change the value of my house or my sense that I live in an historic district, and I enjoy living near the great semi-mansions of Lincoln Street, even if I don't live in one. They're really some works of art there. So that's basically it. I know this is not the place to argue about drainage and impervious surface, but I do want to bring to the Commission's attention that the City of Evanston historically has not enforced what has been on the books. Undoubtedly, when we have to change our garage or raise our yard as the last man standing on the block that hasn't done so. At that point, the city will say, well, no, you can't add fill, and you have to put in some, I hope it won't come to that. But that's where we're at. Those are our comments. We have no objection in principle to the aesthetic changes being proposed. We'll leave that to the commission, but we hope that the request for change, given the stringent standards of this commission, provides an opportunity for dialogue on the water and light issues. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers as to this matter? Are there questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. Okay, so this is for the Karlis and the commission. So since I know that we've asked for more information on exactly what is going to be built and what it's going to look like, and to clarify that through drawings, but in terms of a recommendation for the variance, if there is not a recommendation for a variance, then how are we evaluating the rest of it? I mean, whether or not we vote on this today, or how does that work? If we do not vote for that recommendation for the variance, then how are we voting on the other piece of it?
Well, first of all, you will have to, in my opinion, review the construction and addition first and whether or not that meets the standards. And then you go through the zoning issue. There are standards for review for zoning in the zoning ordinance that we have in our document here in the blue sheet that lists
Right.
3 items that you can address.
Scott, as far as I can tell, until we vote on the C of A, it doesn't go, zoning has to hold it up. If we defer this to the next meeting, it also defers the zoning action, correct?
Yeah, it'd probably be best to vote on both at the same meeting. So in that case, we'd wait for the recommendation of the Preservation Commission before the zoning issue is determined.
That's what the commission has done typically, to vote on the same, at the same time for both issues.
So I still have this issue because I do think that this civil water problem, civil engineering water problem may be a problem, and because in what I'm just looking at on the blue form, there's standard C, it will not be materially detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare or injurious to property in the district or vicinity. So if this seems to be an issue, how are we to evaluate that without further information on potential civil work?
I mean, are these standards that we're supposed to make?
We make the recommendation, am I to understand that we make the recommendation based on these standards? So
Correct.
Just for future, if that is something that we're already hearing, there's some issues of problems with drainage, if we don't actually have the information to try to, even though that's not in our purview, it doesn't seem to me that we can make a recommendation without that information on the variation. So I'm looking ahead at saying, like, seems to be a complicated issue.
Ask a question of Karlis and Scott on that.
Elliot, you want to?
I mean, isn't the only one that's really applicable to us standard A?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is I don't think
I don't think B and C really are within our purview.
Our determination is just supposed to be as to preservation aspects, not as to all.
No, but we make a
aspects.
recommendation versus on the variance. And understanding some of the problems, that's part of what we're doing. So it seems like we have to be responsible to that as well.
I will say that C, I think, is addressing some of the concerns that Mr. Smith had brought up about flooding that is being caused by the rains. But what I know, and what I heard from the city engineer, that what they try to do is that the drainage should not go to the neighbor, or the water should not go to the neighbor. That's what they're trying to address. But if it's going to the alley, that's not the neighbor. So that is a more complicated issue in my mind. If the alley doesn't have proper drainage, it's really beyond the commission's purview to even comment on that. So I think C will address the issue of, if they have evidence showing that the alley is being flooded, or if you have photos of your property being flooded, that would be even more appropriate in my mind. That is going to be detrimental to the neighbor in some way.
Yeah, and again, to reiterate this, a civil engineer will review these plans for the building permit. There's certainly all kinds of other aspects that will be reviewed, fire codes, building codes that could be injurious to the public welfare, but are not within the purview of the commission.
That's what I thought. I think to answer the Smith concerns, it strikes me, well, first of all, in that wonderful flooded alley photo, it's not clear that that this water is strictly the result of 2727 Lincoln. I think you'd agree with that.
No, right now
They're victims as much as you. So, I'm not sure how much of what they're proposing, other than they are adding what seem to be some impermeable surfaces. Their driveway, half their driveway will disappear with the garage. So I think that part isn't as much an issue as possibly some of the other construction. But, you know, I'm luckier than you because we didn't get our alley paved till about 10 years ago. And by then they were much smarter. By the way, they all taper towards the center. But there's about 8 manholes from one end of the block to the other. So there's never a standing water. Yours is just pre-manhole, pre-sewer, and I think that's a separate issue. We had to vote on it about 5 times to get a majority willing to pay, by the way.
The shape of the alley is like this. It slopes towards Bennett Street on one end, it slopes towards Ewing Street on the other end, but in the very middle, affecting about 4 houses, it's got a swale. And the alleys were built higher. Well, let's go back. Before automobiles, the alleys were built lower than the houses to some degree. It was not that big a deal. The houses would slope back, and then they were probably elevated with gravel. But then when they got automobiles, they would bog down in that, so they elevated it considerably. And so the alley was actually higher than the rear portion of everybody's yard on the block until people started raising them. And so the concern is not so much changing asphalt to garage, correct, that won't change anything. The adding a little more runoff, it really won't change. It won't change that much, except for, you know, the terrace and how much of the house is being stuck out. But if that yard gets raised 6 to 12 inches, as we've seen the practice on this block, then the equivalent of several swimming pools full of water will now have nowhere to go but into the alley, where it cannot go to Bennett or Ewing, and therefore goes into our yard. And I could bring you 100 pictures of a yard that you can canoe in if you want to see that, but it's really beyond it's really beyond.
Okay, thank you. Julia, I think to try to answer your question, these standards are a quote from the entire special use. These are the standards for special use in the zoning code. These aren't the preservation ordinance standards. And then the preservation ordinance, it's not specific, but it just says we'll make recommendations with respect to these standards, which I think certainly infers from a preservation point of view. Related to the preservation standards, not that we're supposed to duplicate the entire decision-making process under the zoning code, which I'm sure we're not supposed to do. So it's not crystal clear, but I think the intent is that we're looking at historic preservation issues.
But, you know, we have had projects before us where there were zoning. I remember one specific project. There were zoning issues about it. We were supposed to make a recommendation. We did not feel that we could make the recommendation for the zoning, and it tied into the addition that was being, you know, that was part of the discussion, and I remember it very clearly. So I'm just saying that they do, they do go hand in hand in terms of, if you can make that recommendation to zoning, you have to think about what you're recommending.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that in terms of our decision-making, I mean, we should make both decisions at once, the alterations and the zoning. But what our job, our powers to review zoning are to review it from a preservation perspective. Not, again, these standards are all the standards from the zoning code. These are not from the preservation code. We're not responsible for all these things.
So when you say, I mean, as I interpret it, when we're looking at zoning things, we're looking at things like massing, et cetera, and its effect on the historic district or the homes around it or the home itself, we don't have any purview over what is happening in terms of the drainage in the alley, because it's more the historic massing of, and how all the historic aspects affect.
No, although I think everybody would like to see the totality of the project, see why, the floor plans will show why the project needs to be expanded, and then I'm sure the architect is going to try to, address in the presentation next time some of the objections that have been raised as best as can be done. Okay.
The only thing that we could look at is, because it's that one area of the yard beyond where you're adding that's going to be affected, and whether any of that even gets regraded. If theoretically it remains at the same grade that it is now, then there's nothing that's really changing it in terms of the alley. So I think we're going way beyond where we should.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced that the alley issue is even, I'm not even sure that's going to come up in zoning, ironically. I think it's an engineering issue, a street flooding issue, an aldermanic issue. I'll throw everybody under the bus at one time right now, and not necessarily one that's ours or even zoning's, because I'm not sure zoning addresses what's happening in the alley, unless you could show that it's really going to affect the alley and the neighbors.
Okay, well, I think, as always, the applicant can listen to, should listen to their neighbors, and to the extent there are things that even though I agree with Elliot, it's not our purview, even to the extent there can be some sensitivity at every stage, I'm sure it helps make the approval easier to do that. So whatever, okay. Can I hear a motion to continue this project? Elliot, go ahead.
I move that we continue, wait, before I do, is the next meeting sufficient for you to prepare all of the? Okay.
Oh, I'm assuming it's sometime in early November?
Yeah.
The 12th.
What is
Oh,
the?
that's,
Yeah.
You have an extra week, I
You
guess,
got an
because
extra
we.
week. Lucky you.
So if you change the footprint or anything, make sure that please give time to staff to do the.
would not be changing the.
Okay.
Is that the
But Elliot, you want to finish
12th?
your
Yeah,
motion?
okay, now I will. I just wanted to make sure I had the date. I move that we continue the case of 2727 Lincoln Avenue to the next scheduled meeting of the commission, which is November 12th, 2019.
Second? Aleka, second? You. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think that was all in favor. Carl, were you in favor?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you. 1224 Oak Avenue.
Good evening. My name's Mark Metz. This is my wife, Noreen Edwards. We live at 2125 Sherman Avenue for the last 37 years. And we hope soon to live at 1224 Oak Avenue, which is the subject property. So I just want to give you just a quick 2 minutes of background, what it is we're trying to do, what we hope to accomplish. We've been looking for a number of years to downsize. We're like a lot of Evanston couples our age. We've raised our children. We live in a great big house that we sort of rattle around in. We've been looking to find a good opportunity to downsize. And of course, because we live just north of downtown on Sherman, location is really key for us. I mean, really love being able to walk everywhere. So we've been looking for a property that is walkable to many things in Evanston. And certainly 1224 Oak fits that bill. We sort of got interested in the project, and then the conversation changed a little bit more. We got very interested in the project when our daughter and her husband, parents of our twin grandchildren, who are homeowners in Evanston, and who my daughter's a small business owner, decided they'd like to enter the project with us and occupy one of the units. So we're going to build this more or less like 2 condos, although they won't be condoed, and we'll live in one unit, and our family will live in the other, which is kind of old school and we think kind of cool, something we're all very much looking forward to. To achieve that, there's some things we need, and I'm not going to take you through a lengthy recitation of what's already in the packet, but we need to add a garage with a rooftop screen porch and open deck, and that would be to leave outdoor space for the upstairs unit. We want to add a small side yard deck right against the city park. There's a fence there, a tall city fence, but we want to add a small deck that provides some outdoor space for the first floor unit. We want to raise the roof a small amount and increase the size of the dormers to create some overflow bedroom space for us for when other family members come. And then, of course, there's a lot of renovation, well, pretty much complete renovation inside and some outside that needs to be done, which will include some of the windows, a lot of the windows. So we need to, fix all that. It's not in very good repair. So, clearly, there's a lot of benefits to us. We're very sensitive. We live in a historic district now. We have for 37 years. We get it. We understand. And we're trying to do this in a way that does as little disrupt the architectural look of the place as we can. And we think that the neighborhood and the community benefit from these improvements in a number of ways. First, what we have here is a slowly deteriorating, non-owner occupied two-flat. And frankly, based on the economics of it, if a family doesn't buy this or someone to do a complete renovation, it's the highest and best use is as a non-owner occupied two-flat the way it is. And so I think it's pretty obvious that deterioration will slowly continue and no one benefits from that. So we think that we know that this is going to benefit the neighborhood by improving the outside appearance of the building, restoring it to, first-class building, provide off-street parking on a block that's already really crowded. Especially when there's events going on in Larimer Park, it's impossible. I mean, I've been there, middle of the day to go to the building, and there's nowhere to park. So it, we take and provide the parking that's actually required for two flats. And the view from the rear of the building where the garage is going to go will be greatly improved. Right now, there's a janky-looking deck back there. There's a patio for the first floor that's covered. About three-quarters of it is covered by the upstairs deck. And then there's a 6-foot stockade fence that is actually in the alley, about a foot. So, it's not a good look. There's a gravel parking space for one car. It doesn't really look well. And we think we clean this up, put on a nice garage, nice upstairs deck. It's going to greatly enhance the beauty of it from the alley side. And from the front side, really, it's going to be very hard to notice much difference at all, except that everything will be restored, new windows, and the rest. So that's what we intend to do. Again, we're trying to be very sensitive to the historic preservation standards. Donnelly is our architect, and she's going to take you through the plan. Thank you.
Did you have a chance to sign up the sheet, please, in front of you?
Oh, sorry, I did not. I came in late. I was at the Y board meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I probably know how to work this thing better now. So that is the way it looks right now. Even though it is a two-flat, we believe it was originally built as a two-flat. It has the look, doesn't have a flat roof. It looks more like a single-family home. There's the unit on the first floor and a unit on the second floor. I'll get to pictures. Green algae. Noreen spent a lot of time working on this packet, but so there are quite a few variances being asked for this project, but the bulk of them relate to the garage, which is the alley is to the left-hand side of this. This is the alley here. All of this is new. We're proposing this new garage for 3 cars, which is the zoning request, or the code calls for 3 parking spaces for a 2-flat unit, or two units. This is the existing building, which we're proposing to raise the roof slightly and add these dormers to enlarge the dormers that are the small dormers that are there now to allow the extra space for both units. So both units would be two-story units. The first floor would be taking the basement space as well, which is not a subject of any variance or preservation request. The second floor unit would take the attic space as part of its unit. So this is the left-hand drawing is the existing roof, which has about a 7 and 12 pitch on it. And in order to gain that extra space, this pitch would be about 10, 12 with the dormers on the sides to allow reasonable headroom for 2 bedrooms and a bath up there. This portion, when I get to the side, there's a bay turret sort of thing on the south side that's won't be changed height-wise. The lower portion of the roof, you can see from here, in order to preserve the overhang, and there's rafter tails behind the gutters, and we'd like to save that as opposed to replicating it. The lower portion of this roof would stay at its lower slope, and then the pitch would happen from here up. There are a few other houses in the neighborhood have similar details, but that enables us to save the existing overhang and not have to extend it farther or lower into the way of the windows that are there now. So there's our sides. The top view is the south side that faces Larimer Park. So it shows this portion where the chimney is, and that bay shape is remaining as existing. From this side, the roof is. Get my little. Say what? There you go. Yeah, my green light was off the top of the screen. This dotted line here represents where the roof is now. So it's going up to the 35-foot limit in order to gain that headroom for these bedrooms upstairs. And then all of the windows on this side, the windows are all would be replaced in the same location, same size. The first floor windows have no muttons. The second floor windows have these really interesting sort of 16 square mutton patterns. The only thing new on this side is this door right here, which would serve as an entry from the first floor unit out to the deck that we're proposing on the south side. Then this spiral stair goes up to the deck, which is serving the second floor unit. Then that's the back. So right now there is this deck serves the second floor unit. It's on these long spindly columns that go cover brick area below it. There are these patches where these segments were likely an old sleeping porch style portion of the house. They were infilled at some point in the, who knows, 60s, 70s, with these smaller windows, and this siding is a horizontal sort of cedar redwood looking stuff. The door here is more recent to get out onto this deck. I'm not sure when this deck was built. It doesn't look terribly old. Maybe it's 15 to 20 years old. So we're proposing to, in adding the garage space, the yard would be taken up by that. The amount of backyard that's there now would be taken up by the garage space. So in order to have some outdoor space accessible for the second floor unit, this would be a screen porch here and an open deck above the remaining portion of the garage. And then from this is on the facing the east. Is this north? North, yeah, this is the north side. So facing the adjacent neighbor. So you can see how again, the dotted line represents the old roof, this new roof being raised up. This side has a few more window changes to accommodate kitchen and bedroom were on the first floor. Where the kitchen is going to be a bedroom, where a bedroom is going to be a kitchen. So we had to do some changes with windows. So brick would be replaced and added in. There's already been a few of those sort of windows happening. Right now, this just, I drew this in because it's there. This used to be a window, and they left the lintel and the sill, but the rest has been infilled with brick at some past date. We don't know when. There's my, again, another one of my lopsided 3D views. So that was from the front. That was from this photograph, just to show there's not a lot of difference in the roof height, and the dormer that's on this, that would be drawn on the side, would be bigger than the one that's there now to accommodate a bedroom. This building next door is already taller than I think it's probably taller than the current code allows, but it already has a 3-story, the building next door. And that's a view of the back, showing the screen porch and the garages from the alley. There's a picture of it from 1972. There's not a lot of difference there. So most of the building's been maintained as such as is. I mean, Mark was saying that definitely windows need to be replaced or reworked, brick maintained, et cetera. But the main changes are for the garage and the raising of the roof.
Can you speak a little bit more about the zoning variations?
The variations we're asking for are for lot coverage and for impermeable surfaces, because it is a smaller lot, in order to do the garage. We got just under the impervious surfaces limit because we didn't want to ask for that variance. When we first calculated, we were a little bit over, and then the zoning staff said, could you please reduce it? So we are under the impermeable surfaces limit for the lot. So it's a lot coverage variance. So it's lot coverage and side yard setback for both sides. So rear yard setback, side yard setbacks, and lot coverage, and then the deck on the south side.
So I did that illustration on the bottom.
Could you introduce yourself?
And sign in.
So I'm Noreen Edwards. I'm a landscape designer and contractor, and I usually do draw by hand. I was just... But I'm trying.
And she is one of the homeowners.
So anyway, the red line is the existing fence, which is 2.5 feet into the alley. I found the cross marks in the alley. So, sorry. Oh, sorry. So the red line is the fence in the alley, which is encroaching 2.5 feet. So if you can see her site plan on there, so we would be giving back a substantial amount of space to the alley.
Ms. Edwards, can you use the pointer so we can? Thank you.
Okay, I've never done that.
It's the.
All right.
There you go.
All right, so this is where the garage would be, and you can see the red line. So that polygon there would be given back to the alley. The purple is the existing gravel parking space. That would be garage. The black rectangle is the existing deck. That would be garage. And
use the pointer to show us?
Okay, so the rectangle, that's the existing deck. So the new garage goes like that. It's actually, I should have made it a little bigger because it's 10 feet. It's already 10 feet out. This curvy part is the existing patio. So And then the yellow up here is existing concrete sidewalk. So in order to be under the impervious surface limit, we're removing the concrete sidewalk to the north. And then since there was already, all of this was impervious, and now it's going to be covered with garage, we were able to be under the impervious surface limit.
Are you compliant then with the impervious surface? I'm sorry. Are you compliant with the?
Yes, so we're compliant with impervious surface. All right, we could, so I put this together. This is the city's map, and then I went around and took some pictures, and this is ours and the proposed garage and porch. And we're just proposing this little bitty deck over here for the first floor to use. But as you can see, it is adjacent to this big city park and this giant basketball court, so it's not like we're going to be disturbing the next door neighbors on our little bitty deck. Right, the basketball players will be disturbing us. So there's also a city 11-foot city fence chain link right here. And the city's fence is also encroaching on the alley, by the way. Okay, so our next door neighbor in that lovely building next door has gravel parking in the back that basically covers the whole rear of that property. This garage is really tall. So this is Ridge. All these lots are huge. This building, I went into microfiche in order to find out some information about other properties. This building is 45 feet tall, which is directly behind ours. Their fence looks like it's encroaching on the alley. I'm not sure where their lot line is, but it's right by the alley. In fact, it's going to make it even harder. It's already hard to get out of the parking space because of their fence and this wooden fence here that are right at the edge. There's an asphalt alley or driveway here, and I realized recently as I was looking over the fence that they have an interior side deck on the second floor right here. It's so close to that house right next door. I was really surprised to see that one. This is a 2-story coach house that looks like it's hanging over the alley. Can't quite tell. Also has a shed dormer on the side. It's big. This is a beautiful house and beautiful coach house. This is a big apartment building. So no parking and no rear yard setback. This house is super setback. It has an asphalt parking area here and an attached garage here. No rear yard setback. This has asphalt on the alley. I guess this is all compliant. These houses on Dempster here, these three are, well, this is an apartment building, 2 houses, and these are houses. None of these are compliant. They have no rear yards. This one has a deck and a parking space, a deck and a parking space. This one just has a big asphalt parking area. This one has big stairs on the back from the deck to the second floor. So as you can see, the ours is a relatively small variation compared to some of the other ones going on. So our variations, 4 of them were removed. I don't know if you saw my list there. We could go to that. But the ones that remain are building lot coverage, which we need in order to have 3 parking spaces. Rear yard setback, which we need a variance for in order to have 3 parking spaces. Side yard, well, all right, the north side, the current building is 3 feet, 2 inches or something from the property line, and the garage would line, the new garage addition would line up with the existing building. And so that's that's the side yard setback on the north variation. And then this is a low deck, so we're talking 2 steps, like a foot and a few inches off the ground on the south side of the building right next to the park. So we're hoping that you and the zoning commission would allow us that, since it's right next door to the park.
Thank you.
If you guys, I can answer. There's a whole lot more in the packet with pictures, but I don't know if you guys have looked at them or want me to go through them quickly.
Maybe we should just ask questions, particularly as to architecture issues, just clarity. Does somebody want to?
I have one question. Is right now that's a 2-story home, so you're really proposing a new 3rd floor. Is that right?
2.5.
I know about 2.5.
No, it's an attic, and we had to add 6 more windows in order for it to be called an attic. Because we were going to just put 2 windows on each side of the dormers, and the zoning guy said, well, you have to fill it with windows in order for it to be called an attic.
Dormer. Definition of a dormer.
No, but what is I guess I'll ask Donna, what is the height in there? I mean, you're raising the roof.
Donna, could you come back to the microphone, please?
The existing attic space that's there is accessed through a hatch that you have to get a ladder and go up in, and it's 7 feet from the bottom of the floor joist, or the top of the floor joist, to the underside of the ridge currently.
Yeah, but but you have to have an average height.
So that's why we want to raise the roof up. The ridge would go up higher.
That make the whole thing a habitable space? I mean, it looks
Not
like
the
you're
whole
adding a
thing.
floor.
We're adding half a floor, or the area, not all of the roof it would be able to be used for habitable space. It slopes like the whole front portion would, even though the roof is coming up, it's a hip roof, so.
I mean, having gone through a bunch of those 2.5-story things and always having to fight the idea of making it a 3rd floor.
But
Scott,
there's no zoning.
I'm going to ask this of Scott.
Okay.
Is there a zoning issue here as well? If that becomes a 3rd floor, even if partially?
2.5 stories is what's allowed as far as the height
But is
in this
that
area.
once they make it a 3rd floor?
But I
Once
think what
she
they're saying is
raises
it's
it
a
and
half story, it's a dormer, it's not a full 3rd story.
The habitable square footage is half of what the floor below is. That's where the 2.5 stories comes into definition.
2.5 story was always defined by height of ceiling and ridge and all the rest, not by how much of the square footage of the floor. I'm really confused by how that doesn't appear to be a 3rd floor.
But I don't know that, well,
it does, because it starts to deal with the rest of it in terms of what
I guess you should focus, in terms of what you're saying, on the transformation of this house based on the mass.
Well, that's
which
why I'm
goes back
raising
to,
the
so you don't have to, you just talk about that, which is kind of what you're saying. We don't have, because, so I would say that this house is so transformed by the mass, like whatever, all the variances that, and then the whole rear of this addition piece that's going on is so kind of different in terms of its windows from the existing part of the house that I think that's what we talk about right now. We can talk about that right now. I think that's a problem.
Look at the elevation, but I think before that, this goes back, given all the descriptions of what she was describing as going on, this one, even more than your previous one, really requires seeing floor plans. Because I just don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, even just looking at the exterior, I'm mostly just trying to understand what the front facade, the most visible facade, is going to look like. There's massive differences between your different drawings in terms of what's depicted here.
Well, again, my 3D drawings are not optimal.
I mean, again, I'm not trying to be picky about this discrepancy between this and this. Your 3D drawing is so unbelievably different than the plans that I genuinely can't tell what you're doing. I mean, I've just been looking back and forth to see is it me, and they're just like different projects depicted on these drawings. I don't have any idea what you're proposing, which then probably goes back to the plans might help. I can't tell what you're raising or where. I can't tell. I mean, in some of these drawings, it looks like it's just dormering out of windows, and it just has like white stucco. In other drawings,
The whole house is brick, but there's no stucco anywhere.
Okay, I'm sorry,
She's
just
trying
white.
to shade in what is new from what is existing.
Okay. Well, in others you show a new material. It's like a cedar shingle.
On the back, yeah, the dormers that we're proposing on north and south would have a cedar shake finish. We're not doing brick up there, so they would be a cedar shake as opposed to cedar horizontal siding.
Well, again, like in the kind of 3D photograph where it's like photoshopped in, it's just kind of way back and small. And then on...
It's, the dormer is 30 feet from the front of the building. It is way back. I did a couple of renderings that might help. And I have full plans. I have these little copies if you want to see.
I know we say in this thing construction standards, but I guess my issue is more an alteration standard with the roof and the kind of spatial relationships of the roof that characterize the property. I almost am not as concerned because of the nature of the two-flat property or the house property and the brick massing with the going back as I am with the change in the massing going up and the roof and the dormers. And I think it's, when I say I think it's like relative to standards of alteration, number 9, the size, scale, proportion, massing, which are the spatial relationships that characterize a property.
So the roof height only goes up 3 feet 10 inches. 3 feet 2 inches.
From the existing ridge to the new
From the existing
ridge.
roof to where it is.
But it is a new roof.
And the dormer
New framing.
is 30 feet back from the front of the building. So
Yeah, when I was standing by the house and I was kind of looking at where the existing little dormer is in relation to where the larger dormers will be, to kind of give myself a sense of where it will hit. So.
A picture, a photo.
Sure.
Who's that?
This one, what it will look like on this, what it looks like now, and now what it will look like.
Well, that,
Yeah, that's the
Excuse me, sir, can you please identify yourself and come to the mic? And also sign up.
Recognized.
sign here.
My name is Carlton Ferrano. I'm the owner and occupant of 1104 Dempster. I also carry the proxy of my neighbor, Tom Gallagher. What we're both concerned about is the proposed dormer, and basically the I have not at this point brought a photograph of my 3-flat, which is non-compliant, but grandfathered in. It's really what I want to see, and what your questions are about are the front of the house and how it appears, with the new dormer. Anyway, I prefer a variance where, the roof were higher and the dormers, were the same angle. But That's just me. But I've been in Evanston for 35 years, and I've walked the neighborhoods. This is changing the historic nature of the neighborhood. And by the way, the proportions of 1104 Dempster, 1102 Dempster, and 1106 Dempster are wildly incorrect. Thank you. I hope you do. I hope you do this project. I'm about to be a grandfather. This is a wonderful improvement of the property if it can be done within the historic bounds.
Thank you. And make sure that you sign up, please.
I will.
Again, I'm looking at the drawings of the east elevation of the proposed facade and the dormering out, and then looking, for example, at the 3D simulation and then the south elevation. I can't do. I mean, they look just terribly different to me. I mean, I really can't tell what you're doing.
Well, because this roof is the existing pitch of the roof, and that's the 7 feet high from the attic floor to the peak. That's 7 feet, which we can't make use of as habitable space because there's not enough room there to make it usable for anything. So we're proposing to reframe the roof higher up to the zoning maximum of 35 feet, which is here. So this is a steeper pitch as a hip roof. So the front is a hip roof, the sides slope up to meet that ridge, and then these dormers, because elevations are naturally flattened views, this looks closer to the front than it is, but as Noreen says, these faces of this cedar siding here is 30 feet back off the face of the front of the house. So this elevation drawing just makes it appear closer to the front when it isn't.
Also, the street is probably 2 feet lower than the grade of the house, so you're lower from the public way. So
No, let's talk about the public way. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. Let's look at the south elevation and tell me what in the park is not the public way. I'm standing in the park and looking at that dormer, so I'm not worried about being 30 feet in. Is the park part of the public way, Scott?
We've had opinion from Corporation Council that the park is not a public way.
The park is not a public way?
Right, the alley and the street would be.
Well, but when you're on the street, you can see it obliquely.
Yeah, once you're in the street.
Okay, so on the street, you can see it obliquely, so I think it's public.
That's not the public way?
Street is public way.
Never heard, yeah, and it says.
The law department determined for another case where there's not a thoroughway, so there's no access to it. But if you go to the location, the cul-de-sac, you can probably see a substantial amount of that south facade anyway from the public way.
So can I just say, I think there's an issue again with this project, just having everyone on the commission understand it. The image from the front, this 3D, is not really clarifying the height. It is not showing the whole mass of the structure. And so I really think that the description for us to review of this project need to be better described. And I know that, I'm all for models or modeling. We need something. It's a much bigger project. The roof is really different from what is shown, and you just cannot understand anything from this, this drawing. So I can understand the side elevation and say, oh, the windows don't really work out with the new windows and the other windows, the composition and the opening sizes, but there's a much bigger issue here of the size and what's being changed.
I'm looking, if you can go to, you have some pictures of the property from the park, and there is a lot of vegetation or whatever, but there's a photo of the neighbor to the north. Wait a minute, so Neighbors to north, wait, there's another, so to the one on the bottom, so where you see where the little dormer currently is?
Yes.
And the roof height, as you look at that. So the new dormer is going to be,
Up higher. We're proposing this.
you're almost 4 feet.
3 feet.
3 feet
Well-
higher to,
It looked like
It's 3 feet.
3 feet something.
2 inches.
And then the dormer will be much larger and
yes,
visible from there.
It is larger than the one that's there for certain, because it's meant to accommodate a bedroom.
30 feet from the front of the building.
Well, yeah,
Have it on both
which is essentially where we're seeing that little dormer.
The front 30 feet in is
Yeah.
a little far, approximately where that little dormer is, and continuing on into the side.
And then the pitch of the, when we look at the house from the front, the main facade again, and the pitch of the roof in the kind of historic context of the house massing, instead of that slope, you're proposing to kind of take it up.
Yes. And that's to accommodate habitable space.
But it's also pitched, so, it's hipped, so it goes back, so it doesn't like extend out in the front or anything. It will still be hipped.
But you will see that gable is a volume coming, the dormer coming up through the volume of the roof, because that is, and you will see that, and it will be very different from what's there. That's all.
But appropriate and similar to neighboring, or not unlike neighboring properties.
Yeah, I don't think we're objecting to the idea of the project. I think we're still at the stage of trying to figure out from the different depictions what's being built, and there's too much uncertainty about what's being presented for us simply to understand what's proposed.
So what are your other questions?
What exactly is that, all of that over the top of the garage? As far as I can see, part of it is a
Screen
enclosed-
porch, and part of it is open deck.
Okay.
I guess I'd be curious to see what the implications would be to take some of the habitable volume that's being shoehorned into the attic and instead put it where the deck and the screen porch are, and not have such a radical change to the roof line. Then it is truly just a rear addition,
Right.
which is much more comparable to what other people propose on other projects.
There's virtually no outdoor space for that second floor apartment. One of our objectives here, even though we're young and in pretty good shape.
Could you come up to the...
I'm not thinking about this for now. I'm thinking about it for later. I ride bicycles across the United States for fun, so that's all good. But we all know that things happen, and one of our objectives here is to age in place, which is something that the city has an interest in, has expressed an interest in as well. And one of the requirements I have to age in space is to have direct access to outdoors. And that's what that provides. Same level as the kitchen floor, right out into a screen porch, out onto a deck. So if we put the bedrooms, the extra bedroom space that we need, if our other children come to visit or anybody else, in the back above the garage, now we have no outdoor space for that second floor without going down a long flight of stairs. The other thing that we didn't show in the plans, but we left the space for, inside the garage and inside the screen porch, right off the kitchen door, where it's wide enough in the future to put in a lift, an elevator. Again, with the idea that, who knows, if we like the place and stay there another 20, 30 years, and, we may be able to age in place with the help of that elevator. So all of that thinking gets negated if we put bedrooms in the back. That's why we want to go up. And it just, it's kind of a thing where turn off the lights, close the door, and turn down the heat about 360 days of the year. But we need to, we'd like to have that space to use for when people come.
There certainly are trade-offs, and I guess it kind of comes back to the question of, do you just have too much bulk and too small of a lot and too small of a house? and what's really the critical need.
I would encourage you to get down there and stand on the street, because that thing is substantially up the hill, right? And when you stand on the hill, right now, you really can't see much of the roof at all from head on.
Well, that's, the picture on the
Right.
top left shows
Yeah, that picture on the top left shows that. And, we think by adding 3 feet, we don't think it's going to substantially change the look of it from the front. A little bit from the side because you got a bigger dormer, but it's way back from the street, 30 feet. Now the back, yeah, it's really different than what it is now, but we think it's an improvement, and when you take into consideration everything that's hanging on the back of that house.
Okay, so I guess we should probably just try to summarize what we'd like to see. To the extent I'm sure there's not total unanimity among the commissioners, but in terms of, okay, well, let's just, as long as we're on this, let's just, in terms of, if we could describe the clarity, somebody with more technical knowledge than myself, describe the clarity of drawings we'd like to see. And if Julie, if you could try to do that.
Okay. I think we need a 3D representation either through a model or a 3D rendering of the entire new project with its addition, and we need to compare it to, we can do, you can keep the drawings of the existing, so that's one thing that it's unclear. And I think, I'm just looking at the site plan. And I'll ask Elliot, who's also here, do you think that the site plan clear?
What happened to Ken?
Ken, I don't, whatever. I'm just asking in terms of the clarification of the drawing. So the site plan, I guess that's clear. So I think for me, it's just a 3D rendering. And the context of this it's difficult. I think so for instance, when you show it on a plan of survey, I know you did that, you took the city map. But if we could see just the two houses, or the park and the house adjacent to it, just for context, it's so I guess primarily I'm asking for a 3D drawing, to scale, not
This is a landmark.
not sketch. Well, it isn't to scale. It's a sketch that was made.
I traced it from a photograph.
Yeah.
The whole bulk of the building, the whole bulk.
But not that dormer. You
didn't do, the dormer isn't
Because
correct.
that-
Or you can just build a model.
Yeah.
We do that all the time. I don't.
You want us to spend here? This is.
I think we.
So our budget here.
I'm asking you to describe, however you need to describe it. It isn't clear, so. And if anybody else here wants to talk about any further drawings they need.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, because even the way it's drawn right now, and we look at the backside, your screen porch reads as if it's a solid. And in fact, there's a north wall that's a solid.
Right.
There's a roof, and then there's something essentially transparent. And yet, if I look at, even if you made one of your models, Julie, it wouldn't be able to be made that way. You'd have to make something to make the screen porch read as a screen porch, whether it be openings or something. I think the volumes are really confusing here. And I think the real problem, and I'll speak to Mark, when you keep saying you're not clear on it, it's because of the changes in the roof and a lot of these changes. These are large-scale changes to what that building is now. And, you're not just saying we're building 2 dormers. You're filling in the entire lot you're filling in above the garage, you're filling in, the whole roof is being reconstructed. And it's not clear enough, I think, for everybody to say, yeah, sure, this is just an alteration. I think the point that you made before, I'm not sure that this is construction, that this isn't construction, aside from alteration. I think there's all those standards. I mean, there's an incredible amount of new construction here. And right now, it's...
If you look at the standards for alteration, it includes additions too.
Yeah, that's minor.
Well...
And in fact, the alteration standards are more stringent.
Construction, right?
Are more stringent than the construction standards.
Yeah, we're not trying to give you trouble. I mean, the lack of clarity and just this, at least seeming visual inconsistency between the different materials presented makes it really difficult for us to know what you're presenting. It's not picky. It's just it's really hard to understand what you're doing. And as I keep looking at the different depictions, they just look so different than each other, that dramatically different than each other, that I don't know which is right. I mean, even, just the basic masses and what's going on. I just don't think it's a very clear presentation. I don't think it's even sufficiently clear enough to say I understand what's going on here.
What is it that you don't understand?
The 3D sketch didn't clarify enough the difference between the existing and the new.
It looks very different than the drawings. The drawings look very different from each other.
So the elevation, because it's flat, is going to show you the dormer at the full height. But when you're on the ground, when you do a 3D, you're not going to see most of that dormer.
Well, that was, the request. I mean, one of I think was that the first presenter tonight or second had a good, didn't look like an expensive product of a 3D model that was sufficient to show that. The 1330 Lake Street. I don't know if somebody with more technical knowledge could speak to that, but it just...
Actually, that was an axonometric, meaning that the dimensions are the same, but you're showing two sides of the building. So, for instance, the dimension of the corner on the front would be the same dimension as the corner in the back, whereas the 3D or perspective drawings, you see the difference from the front towards the rear. It gets smaller, so you have a 3D, it's a perspective drawing, basically. Like a photograph, that would be a perspective. Whereas the drawings that we saw for 1330, they were axonometrics, meaning that there's no perspective. You see more of it, but it's because it's a visual effect.
And actually, for pro or con, I feel like I am getting a sense, and maybe if you do what they're asking, maybe my sense will be better, because right now I feel like that dormer relative to the roof kind of, has, in order to get that light in there or whatever, has to be a little higher than historically appropriate. It's a little, even though it's way back, it's still a little front from looking at the front facade and the historical character of the house, so that the way I am interpreting it now, and I don't know if it'll change or not with these 3D drawings that you're bringing, is it's changing the historic massing of the roof and the house and that dormer. I don't know if it would make a difference if there's some ability to kind of bring that angle of the dormer down and still get the light and what you need in the house, or to make it from the front.
Yeah, I think I agree with Aleka. I think to the extent I understand what's going on, I think the attic dormer addition is too large for this house and does not really meet the first two standards of alteration, where we're talking about reasonable efforts to adapt the property with minimal alteration and maintaining the original qualities and character of the property. I think there's a very large deck and a very large screened-in porch, that maybe that's less important than a guest bedroom and bath, and that there's other ways to approach the project. And maybe I would feel differently with a clear 3D rendering of what the massing would be, but as it stands now from what's been presented, I'm not convinced it meets the standards.
Anybody else? Elliot?
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, I realize that the plans that you gave us, these plans, are these preliminary?
I'm not sure what Noreen handed you.
Well, I'm just curious because they don't match the elevations. Well, look at the dormer. I'm looking at a dormer with this little set of windows, and then I'm looking at something that's...
This was preliminary. This was before we did our zoning analysis.
But is it still the same size?
It's just full of windows.
No, I mean, it just,
It's-
when I look at the proportions of
smaller,
this, this looks substantially smaller.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Right.
So
No,
it's really,
this
this is one of these things where I'm just not even clear on what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. That's a bad.
Okay.
No, this
Well,
does not reflect that.
And even if we're trying to understand what you're doing, it's hard to understand what you're doing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. It probably, it's going to take a presentation at the next meeting anyway. I think if you could.
Well, I'm going to be here anyway.
Yeah, but are you able to get them both done by the 12th? No, I'm serious when I'm asking that.
I feel compelled on behalf of all my clients that
All
it
right.
needs to get done.
Well, but it's,
So there is something I just also would have you look at if you're, presenting this and there's no changes. You should look at the windows on that addition on the back and what happens with the little horizontal windows and.
Well, because those are all in the garage.
But it's part of the volume of the house as it's just a big block, and so I'm just telling you that you should think about that as part of the composition.
you might as well hang on.
For the standards, because that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's really
All right.
I wondered, and I'm not an architect and haven't even asked Donnelly, but I wondered if we could lower the pitch of the dormers to, I don't know to what, and how, in order to maintain the headroom that we need in the attic.
They're not going to be habitable, are they, Donna?
Well, I need egress windows because they're bedrooms, so I can't shrink it down too much.
I'm asking.
Yeah. So,
but maybe a little bit in order, if, I don't know if that would help.
I don't know if
your-
I can go height-wise. I mean, that's already down to 7 feet at the edge.
Okay. Well, you'll consider it. And
Yeah.
clearly helping us understand it better and making sure that it's a consistent presentation would help us a lot, just know what we're looking at.
Right.
Yeah, really, we see a lot of these, and fortunately, a lot of the presentations are very clear, and we understand exactly what's going on. And the extent there are any substantive issues, we can just focus on that. But in this case, we don't really even know what this is going to look like, from the front facade, and that's, it just has to be a lot clearer than this. Otherwise, we just don't even know what we're deciding. Genuinely. We're not trying to make trouble for you. Okay, were there any other members of the public who came to speak to this?
So do you want then a perspective drawing?
Just let Julie talk. Let these other people say something. I'm done.
It could be a perspective or an axonometric, but
Yeah.
something that expresses what the massing would really be with these additions.
So from the street and
Straight from the street.
do we have to do the park? Because that's not actually in your purview.
But if you stand in that cul-de-sac, I'm not even saying if I stood at the south boundary of the park where there's a street, I can probably see your house just as clearly, and that is the street. I don't know if anybody's been there, but there is a street
On the other end of the park.
at the south end Crane, and then you'd see it. So, I mean, that's why I have a
Trees.
problem, even if we play this game of the park doesn't count, the street does. And I'm not trying to split hairs, but you're going to see that thing. I spent a lot of time in that park because I did that basketball court. So be careful. And we had to move it as far south as we could because of who owned that house. Hopefully it wasn't you.
Not then.
No, because they objected to having those kids playing basketball next to the house.
It's only 15 feet from the property line.
Couldn't move it any further south. It had to do with the ball fields and all the rest.
Okay, we better move on.
All
It's
right.
getting late. Thank you.
So there were 2 letters. Did you get those? 2 letters in support?
Yes, I received 2 letters of support from neighbors. It's like from Richard Gleason in support of the project at 1213 Oak, and from Christine Coleman at 1217 Ridge. They're in support of the project.
Yeah. No, I think our issues are specific to the presentation and the architecture, not the idea of, we understand what you're trying to accomplish, and certainly like to see you accomplish that. That's not an issue. Thank you.
So,
can we have a motion to continue till next month?
All right, it's been my night. I move that we continue the case of 1224 Oak to the next scheduled meeting of the commission, which is November 12th, 2019.
Okay, second? Second, Aleka. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, all in favor. Thank you.
And we've already continued 601. Yay.
Yes. All right.
And we're still here, and it's 9 o'clock.
Approval of the meeting minutes, did you?
So I received some comments from Elliot, which I sent the commission earlier today. He worked primarily on the first case, 1040 Hinman.
I'll explain. I started making a lot of corrections, particularly because Carlos pointed out that those people are appealing. For those who weren't.
We think they were appealing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they apparently already took the rough draft of these minutes.
Yeah, we send them as part of the
Which is
notification that they had.
And I expressed this to Carlos. I think that's problematic because those are really not official minutes. I think in the future they should just be directed to the video until we have approved minutes, because they'll take that earlier version that all of you got, which wasn't necessarily wrong, but is not an approved set of minutes. And I think we shouldn't let them use those minutes, because I don't necessarily think the council is going to go back and look at the video. And so I tried to clean it up, and I'm not sure. I would recommend I cleaned up some of the English and tried to make clear when it was Mr. Lowndes speaking and when it was others. But there's on the second page, if those who have it, there's a whole section where he began talking about how our guidelines should change. And there are 4 items there, and I didn't clean them up because without having the video, I was having a problem even in what you transcribed, understanding what he was asking. So there's sort of, on page 2, for those who have it, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think the rest of you should read that and try to reconstruct it, because in all fairness, I still don't understand what was being asked. I didn't completely clean it. I finally sent it all, those who got it, in blue. I just took the whole thing and made it blue and said, this is what I corrected. I'm not going to go and let you look through Microsoft Word and see it. The rest of the minutes, by the way, the rest of the way, there were very few items. There were little grammatical things, and they were fine. But I think this one, in part, because there was a lot of serious issues in general about, solar panels, et cetera, that I think we should be very careful about what it says.
But where do these minutes appear before we approve them?
No, what we did is we sent a notification to the owner of the denial, and as part of it, we sent the notes, which are this, they're not substantially the same, but we needed to show them what the commission did and also the findings. So they understand these are not the minutes, or the ones that we sent were not the minutes. I think part of the issue for me was when you read the portion, I didn't necessarily wanted to verbatim say whatever Mr. Landich said. So there's paragraphs that do not necessarily name the person, but they should have been bullet points rather than just paragraphs. So I think that would clarify much better, because everything that's happening in the first 2 pages is what Mr. Landich said rather than somebody else.
Yeah, after that, if you look after that, I mean, and there were some people even, I even wrote in somewhere in there, I said Dorian Brower on the first page, his contractor, but I don't know if it's his contractor or he was the solar consultant. I was really not, we didn't have his title here. And I think when we're throwing out names, and that occurs, by the way, Karlis, later on, there's some other guy in the public comment, you pointed out who one of them was. I don't know if one of them was a neighbor. I don't know who Arthur Anderson is either.
He's not a neighbor, but he's a resident.
Well, it would help, because I think anybody reading this, I mean, you made it. All of the commissioners are fairly clear. I didn't alter. I think everybody you identified those, but I just think we need to be careful about people seeing these things without us having approved it.
Because it's true,
And
like, who's Dorian?
We went through that terribly, painfully on, Harley Clark, which is going to become the poster child for redoing the minutes. So I think we need to be careful. If we think, and maybe it's always, if someone's being denied and the potential is there, then we should be very careful. I think if if they've been approved 7-0, I don't think there's as much of a concern. And I'm just looking at it in terms of what needs to be addressed and not. That's all.
Yeah, I think that Dorian Brewer, he must, I'm just reading this, and we have to know in these minutes who he is, because he's saying all of these, so is he's saying things that is he the contractor?
Well, if you recall, he was the person who made the presentation, so he's the installer. And I know that he doesn't say in the minutes necessarily, but clearly in my mind, he was the contractor installer. And then the owner spoke too. So I don't disagree with your comment in terms of identifying on the minutes.
No, but because he's saying things that are so, who is he saying there's 8 to 10? He should be just defined as who he is.
Well, we can fix that.
So,
Sorry,
anyway.
That was my problem, Julie. I mean, I knew who Dreyer was. I mean, he was the guy that was here because when I was asking what's the efficiency of the system and so on and so forth.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point, just no matter approved, denied, or whatever, just as we have people say who they are and, resident, neighbor, contractor, whatever. We should remember to put that in the minutes, so when you go back and, because 6 months from now, even if I remember now, I might not remember then. And I think I understand what you're saying, Elliot, about the presentation, but I think your idea of just bullet pointing the owner's presentation, just like you do all of our comments, would be good.
I didn't have time. I was tempted to take everything he said and put it in quotes. Just grab the whole thing and put it in italics, not quotes, just.
But remember, this is not verbatim. This is the other.
But it's not verbatim, and that's the problem.
So it's
it's not verbatim. And just like Karlis usually does down below, say, Commissioner Ken, and then the bullet points summarizing what, Ken said, and bullet points summarizing what Julie said. It's the same thing, summarizing what the owner said.
Fine, if you go back, I put in a lot of extra Mr. Lowndes and he's into a lot of these sentences that weren't there, because I was trying to make it clear when he would. Primarily, it was the owner.
It's always, I mean, I've done other work similar to this is always hard because, you know so well who said it, whatever, but thinking about like somebody else reading it.
More than you.
I think more importantly, since this is going to go before the city council, most importantly, I do not think that what Preservation Commission has to use to evaluate solar panels or other issues such as that, what we're sort of, since the commission was really split on that, or it was very close, do I think the city council is going to be able to go back and look at, what we had to work with? Is that something that's going to be important, or is it not? And that's when I go back to that whole thing of like, well, there has to be some kind of workshop or something with more than just the Preservation Commission to sort of understand, what the issues are for us versus.
But that's something we did at the end. If you go to the end of that.
Yeah, it says it, but I'm just saying it's going to go to the council. I just see the.
Well, I think the difficulty, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but the difficulty I had was that in the middle there, he basically made a kind of political statement which had nothing to do with his appeal. Because all of those things he's talking about, well, maybe you shouldn't consider all the views because it's a trade-off with solar efficiency, et cetera. And it was almost not about his. It was, but it wasn't in the standards, and we were being asked to consider whether, do we rewrite the standards while we were reviewing his case, which we didn't. I think that was the gist of what happened, but, and there's nothing wrong with what he was saying, but it's you got to make it clear that, how did we evaluate that? And I think fortunately, and I will say, not necessarily fortunately, I'm sorry if that's a bad choice of words, but I think it was very important that there was so much commissioner comment from everybody. And this is just my thing, and Carlos knows this, I think that when we're voting on a lot of these issues where it's not going to be 7-0, we're okay with your windows kind of thing, that all of our comments, when we're voting, we should be stating whether before or after so that they're in the minutes, because I think they do become important, not just for council, but I think for future commissions, because it establishes, stare decisis, whatever you want to call it, but essentially that's what it is.
What you see, though, reading these minutes, which I think are complete, is that there were a lot of pluses and minuses, and it was a close case that people had genuine disagreements on, and I think that was just the reality of it.
But I think this comes up, we just, rightfully or wrongfully, the things we just discussed now are going to become, there were controversial issues just now, and I think it's going to become important why, one way or another, how just the example of the one that we just finished off or deferred essentially will be another one where there will be a lot of issues there that are beyond just the standards, although we try to encapsulate them in the standards. But it's hard.
Yeah.
Look, you were struggling with this one. I was watching you, and you kept trying to explain that you couldn't quite understand it.
Well, and the solar energy has, there are reasons why we try to improve it, but there are reasons why half of us didn't like this particular project. And what comes across to the city council reading this is not necessarily like the commission decided for these reasons that it didn't meet the standards. It's
well, who represents the commission, Carlos, when it comes to council?
Excuse me. Last appeal, former Chair Williams was there as a public comment, and I contacted Mark, to attend the meeting on October 14, which is the one, I believe, that's for the 2404 Ridge, an appeal. It depends, because we don't know if council will have questions to the commission. We don't know if the applicants will actually be able to present their case, because in the other cases, the applicants would make their appeal known through the public comment section of the council, and then when the council is reviewing the case, they may call upon the applicant to explain something, but they don't necessarily ask them to make a presentation.
So is it done at council or is it done at Public Works?
It's council. Yeah, because if the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council were composed by all the members of the council, it would go to P&D, but they're not, so it goes to the council. And they have to make a decision whether or not they decide to accept the appeal. If they decide to accept the appeal, they can see the case.
So they don't get any document other than our minutes?
They do get the complete set, which includes the application for the COA, the commission's minutes, and then the application for appeal.
But there's no response from the chairman or anything like that?
No.
Interesting.
I mean, if it were an important issue, I could try to speak up. I don't know that.
Well, I'm not
solar
sure.
energy,
I think this one's an important issue for a lot of the reasons that Julie's pointed out.
And I do think, I mean, I know that Diane in the past, when things have come before city council, I know that when she was chair that she made a statement. I mean, I know some of those. And I think I'm particularly sensitive about this one because we did get this letter from the head of sustainability who basically, we got a letter. So there's a letter on record that we received, and I don't think he ever, anyway, I just thought that it was very clear the direction that he that he put him, or what he was saying, and that there was no further dialogue. And I think that was, I just thought that was unfortunate, I am saying.
Did Donna ever respond to you in terms of a...
I spoke to the Landmarks Illinois, and is that what?
Yes.
Yeah. And I spoke to Suzanne. I had left a message for Bonnie, but I spoke to Suzanne, called me back, and she basically said that she was going to look into it and see if there was someone that we could have a dialogue with. But I think, so that is, nothing came of that. It may, because she was talking to me about the Oak Park group and other groups that have already been dealing with it. But I think, so anyway, I don't know where that stands. So anyway, I just said what I said.
I just want to mention to commissioners is that I've been in contact with Kumar about, the commission's interest of having an informational meeting, and Kumar and I will discuss this issue further this week. We have a meeting on Thursday, and I also attended the APA Illinois chapter session on Friday. I have attended 2 sessions about solar energy, and I think probably there's 1 or 2 people there that I think that might be helpful to contact and see if they're interested in share their experiences with solar energy and how they deal with historic buildings, because they mention among other things that communities, in order to promote solar energy, should address through the zoning requirements where, for instance, they will say that, you can put solar panels on your roof, but at the same time they said, except that there are communities that they would allow you to put solar panels on the front elevation. So that piqued my attention. So they have dealt with this issue and they're trying to work with these communities. But I think I can probably find out more about their background and whether or not they would be interested in, attending an informational session and how they do with other communities.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, after talking to Suzanne at Landmarks Illinois, I talked to her a little bit about this. It's like a case-by-case, issue of, like, what the house is, landmark or contributing structure, where the panels go. It's case-by-case, and it'll be, and everyone will make their decision. So there isn't a definitive, so I just want to say this, I don't think there's a definitive answer to, like, yes, you can put them wherever you want, but it is really based on, it's based on the building.
Well, that even came up during our deliberation, because there was even the issue that the National Park Service does show how you can deal with it, but none of that particular building or the configurations where they say, here's how you can deal with it, just didn't work. And I think two of us pointed out that those weren't examples that were applicable to that particular house.
Well, I do think we need to.
It's a case by case, I agree with you.
We need to meet with Kumar because I think, if for nothing else, just so he appreciates that, while we're supportive, there are things we have to consider as well. And, he did invite that we include someone with preservation expertise. That was his idea.
Yes. So on Thursday, I will have a better understanding from your comments how I approached the issue with Kumar. I think there is a lot to explore, what the city wants to do, because obviously they're looking at the city's decision to come off the grid by I can't remember the year, 2030 or something, where, if you follow that, then that would mean that a lot of these buildings will have solar panels. And how do you address that in a historic district or landmark? It's just that right now my sense is that the solar panel community or the green sustainable community, they're working at all levels, at the local, state, and federal levels to make things happen. So the fact that I put some information from the National Park Service is because to illustrate the commission that, they're also thinking about that, solar panels, and they show some examples how they recommend doing it. I think that by talking to the people who work on this field, that we probably have a better understanding of what we can do to allow people to address that and at the same time maintain the integrity of their historic districts and landmarks.
Didn't somebody say?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, didn't somebody say that some communities are looking into doing kind of groups of solar panels? Yeah, farms.
Right.
I mean, I'd be interested to know if there's some, kind of cutting edge creative thing that Evanston could do to look into, solving, because we all want to be able to effectively harness solar energy, but we have to find a way to kind of mesh the
There's an interesting dilemma here, because if you recall, I don't know how many meetings ago we had all the people with the tree ordinance discussion. And in fact, one of the people that was here that night, because it's a former client of mine, was there because somebody's building next door to her, and they cut down several trees because there's nothing to protect them on private properties. Ironically, I was over at their house last week, and we were talking about could they have done solar on my client's house, nothing getting built. And it turns out, if you go to even Edison's website, which will do a preliminary thing, it won't even bother calculating because there's too many trees even after they've lost. Granted, maybe there's a little more sunlight now, which means there are homes. Mine would have been 12 to 15 years payback. And that would mean that somewhere my shingles may have to be replaced. So to say that we're going to make it by year 20-something is going to be very difficult for a lot of these houses.
So I think we understand there needs to be a robust discussion about solar panels and their role in preservation. Right now, we've got the approval of the minutes on the agenda. So I think we understand there needs to be a future discussion about that and want to get the right people in the room for that. But I think that's not an item on the agenda tonight.
Okay, why don't we?
Got to have Scott
I
running.
think with the changes to minutes, they look pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we could approve them.
Well, anyway, I think there's just parts of it, if anybody, I think, I didn't have all the names of the people.
Okay. Well, why don't we approve them, and then if anybody has any small technical.
And I'm not going to amend it again.
Okay.
I move we approve the minutes of the September 10th meeting as edited by Elliot.
Second? Second? Alaka, all in favor, say
I'm
aye.
abstaining.
Okay.
As opposed to
Susie
not,
abstaining.
as opposed to nay.
Okay, staff reports?
Subject to revision, I refuse to accept.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was trying to find my way here. Who made the motion again? That was
Ken.
Ken, okay. And
Thank you,
then,
Ken.
Aleka seconded.
okay,
And, 5 in favor, and then Susie abstaining.
thank you. And also, Elliot, did you abstain?
Yeah, I abstain.
Yeah, so there are 2 abstentions, right?
No, Carl abstained. Did you abstain?
I voted.
Oh, he voted. Thank you, Susan.
You and Elliot.
2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you.
I abstained because I didn't feel fully correct.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is staff report regarding referral from Alderman Simmons of the Fifth Ward to asking the commission to look at the 1995 initiative by Alderman Joe Kent regarding the pitch. Basically, it was an effort that unfortunately didn't have a completion. But we have volunteers working on different areas of research and history, try to identify whether sites or buildings that will have certain significant, either culturally, architecturally, or historical significance. So Alderman Simmons is asking the commission to look to that information that we have and see if there's anything that the commission can come up with to recognize sites and buildings in the Fifth Ward. So I did include it in the packet, the mission of pitch, how it basically explains what the objective was, and they have certain goals as well, where they were to achieve. So I think that I was just thinking that maybe we can go back a little bit more to the documents that we have and see if we can understand better what the intention was, and eventually, gives the alderman a response to how the commission could help.
So, were there older documents or something?
Yeah, we had an intern that was in his graduation project. He wrote a paper on the effort, and I think that basically summarizes everything about the project. So I can, find that document and distribute to the commission for the next meeting.
Okay, great.
May I ask a question? Unless there's somebody, oh wait, Karlis.
You've been so patient.
Yes, you guys, thank you.
I'm Ann Earl, and I personally surveyed every single building in the Fifth Ward twice. I went over it. I developed a form that doesn't look like a form that you would do for a historic district, principally because of the architectural integrity issue. I didn't do the history. I did building permits for everything that had building permits. And I surveyed all of the buildings. But that was 1996. And that needs to, that's outdated by now. And then things changed and nothing happened with it. There were a group of women working on the history part. I don't know what happened to that. There's a lot of history there that those of us who are white are going to have a next to impossible time to find out. It's certain well-known people, but community activists who fall under the radar. If anything's going to be done, I have not talked to the alderman. Mary has. If it's going to be redone, it needs to be resurveyed. I mean, 1996 is a long time ago. And that's close to a quarter of a century. So, and that's time consuming.
Do you know what happened to the survey?
I have it.
Anne, you and Mary are hoarding all kinds of goodies.
I have it, and I'm about to get rid of it.
You're going to give it to McWilliams.
Because I'm moving into smaller space. The building permits were at the Evanston History Center were arranged differently then, and I copied all of them, and I'm going to give those to Dino Robinson, which seems like the best use of them. My biographical material on Dr. Garnett, who was the first African-American doctor in Evanston, I gave to Rhonda Craven, and hopefully she'll come up with a paper. I gave a paper on Dr. Garnett at the State Historical Society convention. In the 90s. And Rhonda has, surprisingly, I had some information that Rhonda didn't know. Rhonda's an excellent researcher. But she has church connections. And that I didn't know and couldn't find out through Second Baptist. and I hope she comes up with paper sometime. There's certainly enough material there. I had enough material to give a lecture. But, and was offered to do a paper and didn't, for whatever reason, didn't do it. But there are a lot of other lesser known people. One of the days I happened, and the man was out in his front yard, a house on Emerson that's notably bigger than anything else in the block. And it was a house that was moved. If you see a house that's an old house, it's too big for the area, it probably got moved there. And had a fascinating conversation with him that he moved. They at various times housed families who were new from the South, who were new to Evanston, and until they could get a place of their own, which gave me a whole new perspective on overcrowding. You know, too many people in a household. He said sometimes they had 3 or 4 or 5 families living there, which he agreed was too crowded. But temporarily, I got to know Pauline Williams. Mary and I both got to know Pauline Williams very well. She died some years ago. She was born 11/11/11. I remember that.
She was the first black woman to sit on the Plan Commission. So.
And she was not educated. She came up here to live with an aunt after her mother died. Her mother died, her father died. She was 11, she went to ETHS for a semester. ETHS kicked her out because she was black. And said she didn't live in Evanston because the aunt she was living with on Asbury, the second house north of Emerson, worked in Wilmette. And so she didn't belong in Evanston. Evanston at that point did everything they could to get rid of all of its black students in the high school. They had a separate grade school, separate black grade school at the time. But tried to keep their kids out, all black kids out of high school. So she never graduated from high school. But she was a very smart woman. And we did 2 exhibits thanks to her. One on Dr.
You did, right? on Dr. Garnett.
I did one on Dr.
Oh, the hospital.
On the hospital. She was very active in Community Hospital of Evanston. After World War II, because of the segregation in the South, there was a federal law passed that essentially permitted black hospitals in areas that would otherwise not be served to be built. Community Hospital of Evanston, which of course was sitting here with 2 hospitals, Evanston Hospital, which was formed in the 1890s, and St. Francis in 1902. But neither would accept black patients. St. Francis, when it was founded, said, according to the newspaper, that they would accept anybody, but in the I haven't looked at this in years, 62 maybe, they quoted the sister who was in charge of the hospital saying they had no black employees in any capacity. And the next year, they opened it up. Now, actually, Dr. Garnett's husband, who was also a physician, Dr. Butler, died at St. Francis Hospital. I was told by a former mayor's wife who was
Oh, yeah, that would have been Edgar Vanneman.
Vanneman. Shortly before her death, she'd been very active in the
Visiting Nurse
Association. And that black women sat in the parking lot of Evanston Hospital until their contractions, pregnant women in labor, until their contractions were 5 minutes apart. And then they went to the waiting room, to the emergency room, and the emergency room could not turn them down if they were 5 minutes apart. 6 minutes apart, out you go. But they could not have any visitors, any black visitors. So there's a lot of history there. There was a black Y, about which I know very little, except that it was torn down after we lost a battle to save it.
No, the black one. No, the hospital's still there, the black hospital, but the Y is gone. That was on Emerson. This large apartment.
You know, we should probably, it's really, really late.
May I just give you
For just 1 minute, probably?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really,
Dino Robinson and Ann and I formed the basis of the pitch committee. We did all the research, and there were many reasons. We were never told exactly why it was canceled, but it was canceled.
this was in the 90s.
The 1990s. We did have the National Trust Conference come up here because they didn't have much on conservation districts, and they particularly didn't have anything on black conservation districts. We have met once with Alderman Simmons and Dino and feel very strongly that this project should go forward again. We were very, very disappointed when it didn't go forward, and we'd like to encourage the commission to do it. The basic work, Ann did the basic work for the project. That's a lot of the hard work that has to be done. Looking at the buildings again has to happen again. They have to be resurveyed, but the basic knowledge of what these buildings were, the permit work is done. So it's a project that could go forward, and we'd just like to put in our 2 cents for the project.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think it's really late. I think it's just really late for a lot of us. I think it's probably, I mean, we'll definitely come back to this issue. It's just we're not going to be able to really work on it tonight.
No, but you have our views on the
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good.
Okay, was there anything else we needed to cover before? Okay, can you hear a motion to adjourn?
What exactly are we being asked?
You know, it's a whole long.
Are we being
discussion.
asked to?
Personally, having had the flu all week,
Okay.
I'm done.
I mean, I think we're being asked to, like, it's a lot of work, and it's volunteering to continue the work, and I guess we'll have to discuss how that would happen, or what that might look like.
Why don't we, for the next meeting, come back and discuss like what the preservation role might be in this? So, okay, good. Have a motion to adjourn. Second. Carl, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Thank you.